Hi, I'm Larry Myers. I've spent the last several days looking at videotape from the 1993 AMA National Championship Motocross Series. The same tape, in fact, that provided the foundation for 6 one-hour national TV shows. You know what? 1993 was a great year in motocross. And that's what this videotape is all about. The 1993 year in review from Moto Video. Now, at some tracks, we had 1 or 2 cameras and we shot only the highlights. At others, well, they were full-blown shoots. We had cameras all over the place. Can you imagine in 12 races how much tape we accumulated? Now try sorting all of that out and cramming it into one 90-minute video. But that's what we did, and here is the result on the fast track to victory. As I said, some races are highlighted, while in others you'll see every pass, every crash, and every checkered flag. On the fast track to victory, the 1993 motocross season in review. Now, at each event of the 12-race championship series, 2 classes were run. The first 8 races were made up of 125s and 250s. The last 4, the 500s went at it, while the 125s continued their championship chase. To make the championship season easy to follow, we'll take one class at a time and follow the competition from the first race of the season all the way to the championship finale. First up, the 125 class from Gainesville, Florida. At the Gainesville track, we had a couple of cameras to catch the highlighted action. Let's take a look at some of the competition in the 125 class. Defending champ Jeff Emig, Team Yamaha. Emig comes from Highland Ranch, California. Doug Henry from Connecticut, rider number 16 for Team Honda. The other Honda entry in the 125 class, the hottest rider on the circuit, he'd been ripping the Supercross series apart, Jeremy McGrath from Murrieta, California. Michael Craig is rider number 24. Craig from El Cajon, California, is a newly signed Kawasaki rider. Then there were, of course, many veterans like Denny Stevenson for Team Suzuki. Let's watch the start of the highlighted season from Gatorback, Florida. The gate dropped on moto number 1. Michael Craig, the newly signed Kawasaki rider from El Cajon, took the early lead. Jeremy McGrath made a couple of passes on the first lap to settle back into second. Eric Kehoe was running third, Brian Swink fourth, and Doug Henry was fifth. Defending champ Jeff Emig, rider number 1, did not get a particularly good start, but from the drop of the gate, Emig was on the gas and moved quickly through the field. Meanwhile, at the head of the pack, on lap number 3, Jeremy McGrath had taken the number 1 position. In close pursuit was Michael Craig. Those 2 riders, battling each other, quickly pulled away from the rest of the field. The experts on the sideline were amazed. Jeremy McGrath was not supposed to be able to do that. Claim was he had not the endurance for outdoor motocross. Meanwhile, Doug Henry had cut a swath through the pack and had moved to the number 3 position. Well behind the leaders, rider number 43 was Ezra Lusk from Bainbridge, Georgia. Ezra's considered one of the top stars of the future, but Ezra on this day at Gatorback did not fare well at all. He would finish 10th in moto number 1 and 11th in moto number 2. Behind the leaders, most of the action took place. Jeff Emig in moto number 1 worked all the way up to the number 2 position. In the second moto, Emig was a DNF. A crash took him out of competition. Eric Kehoe, on the other hand, turned in 2 outstanding performances to finish second overall. He was 5th in the first moto and won moto number 2. Michael Craig turned in solid performances. A pair of third-place finishes gave him 3rd overall. The winner of the day, Jeremy McGrath. He finished 1st in the first moto and rounded that off with a 2nd in moto number 2. McGrath was proving the experts wrong. It appeared McGrath would be a factor in this 125cc championship series. Craig, Henry, Huffman finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th, with Kehoe, as we earlier said, finishing in the number 2 spot. The 1993 125cc National Championship chase was underway. From Gatorback, it was on to Southwick, Massachusetts. The Southwick track is touted as being one of the toughest on the circuit. It's made up of mostly sand that shifts on every circuit of the track. That creates new lines and new problems. For Jeremy McGrath, corner number 1 was a problem. Rider number 15 went down with a bunch of other riders, and McGrath, getting assistance from what appeared to be the entire contingent of Honda mechanics, got up and into the fray at the tail end of the pack. Meanwhile, up front, Doug Dubach had taken the hole shot. He would hold that number 1 position for 4 laps before being passed by rider number 43, Ezra Lusk. On the same lap, rider number 16, local favorite Doug Henry, would also take the measure of Dubach, and he would set out in pursuit of Ezra Lusk. There was the pass as Dubach swept into the number 3 spot by Henry's pass as he took over second. So it was Lusk, Henry, and Dubach at the end of 4 laps. With Henry putting the pressure on Ezra Lusk, the pair of riders quickly moved away from the rest of the field. Henry was dogging every move that Lusk made, first to the inside, then to the outside, and finally on a big sweeping right-hander, Henry left the gas on and took the measure of Ezra Lusk. Most of the eyes of the crowd were on the leaders. However, a few were looking back in the pack for Jeff Emig and Michael Craig. Where were they? Well, Emig fell on the opening straightaway, and Craig a few corners later. They were well at the back of the pack. When the checkered flag came out, it belonged to Doug Henry, his first ever championship moto win.
Doug, how's it feel to win a pro moto here in front of your hometown fans?
It feels great, man. They were cheering for me all the way. I loved it. I love it here. It's great.
When the gate dropped for moto number 2 at Southwick, the crowd was looking for more of the same, and they got it. There was an altercation in corner number 1, but all of the stars missed it on this go-around. In the second moto, Jeff Emig, the defending 125cc national champ, got a good start. He held off the charge of Doug Henry, who started in second place, for about a lap and a half. The 2 riders pounded away at the Southwick course. Henry going to the inside, then to the outside, with Emig blocking every move. Finally, Doug Henry would take the measure of Jeff Emig with just about a lap and a half gone in moto number 2. And Emig would hold on to the number 2 position throughout the remainder of the moto as Doug Henry would sweep to the win. The checkered flag is out. Doug Henry crosses the line. He wins moto number 2, goes 1-1 on the day for the overall win, the first in national championship competition for the rider from Bolton, Connecticut. Ezra Lusk with moto finishes of 2-6 finished second overall, followed by Larry Ward. Then Jeff Emig, who put together a 14-2 pair of motos, and Ryan Hughes rounding out the top 5. The championship standings after 2 rounds. Doug Henry is on top with 86 points. Then Jeremy McGrath, the young man they said couldn't ride outdoor motocross, is in second place. Eric Kehoe, Ezra Lusk, Michael Craig rounding out the top 5. High Point Raceway, Mount Morris, Pennsylvania, was the site of round 3 of the National Championship Series. Highly touted rookie, 593, Robbie Rayner, put in his appearance only 3 days after turning 16 and obtaining his pro license. Rayner, the holder of many amateur national titles, looking to take that talent, transfer it over to the pros. For the day, Rayner did not do all that bad. He crashed in his qualifiers, still got up to finish 3rd, and turned in 2 outstanding motos to finish with a 7th and an 8th overall. First corner out of sight of our camera, big crash, big pileup, claimed several of the top stars in moto number 1. Not Jeff Emig, though, our defending champ. He got the hole shot and he would sweep to the victory. Did claim, however, Doug Henry. See the shroud hanging off the side of his bike? Henry picked himself up. He was toward the rear of the pack. He still managed to finish in the number 2 position in moto number 1. The crash was triggered by Jeremy McGrath, rider number 15. He slid out. A bunch of riders went with him. For the day, Doug Henry would finish 2nd and 3rd for 2nd overall. McGrath would take home a 3rd and 4th. He finished 3rd overall. Robbie Rayner, as we said, turning in an outstanding performance for a first-time rookie as he finished with a 7th and an 8th on this tough Mount Morris track. Up front, though, it was all Jeff Emig. The Team Yamaha rider and defending champ swept to a pair of moto wins to put himself back in contention for the title.
Well, both motos is definitely the way to win it. And from a start to finish, both motos, you know, I couldn't ask for any more. You know, there at the end, I'm kind of telling myself, you know, you've done this before, let's just keep calm, and do this again.
Well, you really made a statement today, haven't you?
Oh yeah, like that's what I'm gonna try. The year has been so-so for me, but I'm here to show the last year's champion's back, and he wants it again.
Well, last year's champ made a believer out of me. Moto finishes of 1-1. The overall goes to Jeff Emig. 3 races, 3 different winners to date. Doug Henry, Jeremy McGrath, Ryan Hughes, Eric Kehoe rounded out the top 5. Let's take a look at the point standings after 3 events down of the 12. Doug Henry on top with 128, McGrath in second with 103, then Emig vaulted all the way from 6th place up to 3rd. points-wise, he was still a long way back. From Pennsylvania, the series moved west for the silver anniversary running of the Hangtown Classic in Sacramento, California. Moto number 1, Ezra Lusk, Team Suzuki's Ezra Lusk from Bainbridge, Georgia, took the hole shot, and Ezra, long touted to be one of the faster riders on the 125cc circuit, looked like he had things pretty well set up for a great day of motocross. But Ezra, as he is prone to do, loses concentration and takes a little dirt nap. Watch this. Bang. Ezra catches the fence pole with his right arm and goes down. We'll go back and take another look at this unfortunate incident that took Ezra out of contention for the overall win in Sacramento. Here he comes. Now watch him. He cuts it just a little bit too close, loses control of the Suzuki, and just like that, Ezra is on the ground. That gave the lead to rider number 1, the defending champ, Jeff Emig. Emig was being chased by Jeremy McGrath. Those two riders pulled away from the pack. Meanwhile, rider number 16, Doug Henry, from out of the pack, made this pass on Eric Kehoe, rider number 22, take over the number 3 position. But up front, it was Jeff Emig taking moto number 1. Finishing in the number 2 position was Jeremy McGrath, with Doug Henry finishing 3rd. The second moto started out where moto number 1 left off. Jeff Emig was out in front, but not for long. Now, Emig managed to miss the altercation at the rear of the pack, but watch coming up. Emig gets sideways, he'll lose control, and he is down on the ground. Now, that's just the start of Emig's problems. He's trying to pick the motorcycle up, but no cooperation from his friends as they knock the handlebars, the wheels, and then the pins out from under Jeff Emig. He'll wait till the rest of the pack passes. He jumps back over the top of the motorcycle and finally gets going. He'll be dead last. Now, from that point, Emig really got on the gas, made no more mistakes for the day. As a matter of fact, by the time second moto was over, Jeff Emig had swept all the way to the number 7 position. He had to pass some 33 riders to get there. The win in moto number 2 gave Jeremy McGrath the overall win for the day, followed by Doug Henry, then Jeff Emig, James Dobb, Brian Swink. Let's take a look at the championship point standings, and we'll go to Jeremy McGrath.
Well, I just tried to ride the moto the same as I did the first time. I think I lasted a little bit longer than that time. I think the heat got to me a little bit more in the first moto, and I think I didn't let it get to me that time.
From California, the 125cc Championship Series headed east to Buchanan, Michigan for round 5. Here are the highlights as seen on Prime Network. At the drop of the gate, an all-too familiar sight this year, Jeremy McGrath, the Team Honda rider, with the hole shot. But that's not going to last for long. Behind him, Scott Sheik will take over the number 1 position, and that is where the action started in moto number 1. Sheik is ahead at this point. There's McGrath. Running behind McGrath comes Ezra Lusk, then Brian Swink. There's Doug Henry, the points leader, Jeff Emig, and James Dobb. Watch this. Sheik was able to get back up and fired up the 125 Kawasaki all in one motion and got back in line. I'll tell you what, his day in the sun, his day of glory was over at that point. Meanwhile, Jeff Emig, 125cc national champ, was on the gas. Jeremy McGrath is out front at this point with Ezra Lusk running second and Emig coming from out of the pack in the number 3 slot. He disposed of Lusk and caught up to the rear wheel of McGrath. Now, McGrath would prove just about as tough to get around as Ezra Lusk and the rest of the riders in the field, and we're going to see Jeff Emig in the number 1 position in the opening moto with this 125 class. Emig won his first ever national at Redbud just 1 year ago and looks set to repeat that outing here today. So with Jeff Emig out front, Jeremy McGrath running in the number 2 position, Emig will wave goodbye to the rest of the field and he'll streak for the checkered flag. Meanwhile, here comes Doug Henry, and Henry too was on the gas. He was following the lead set by his teammate Jeremy McGrath in the early going. Matter of fact, he went by McGrath and said, "You follow me for a while, I'll show you how to get it done here." Henry would end up in the number 2 position. Here comes the checkered flag. Here comes Jeff Emig. There was just a little fist pumper for the crowd, and he takes moto number 1. Let's jump to moto number 2 and watch the starting straightaway action. Keep your eyes glued to the back of this pack. Wham! Bam! Sit that motorcycle upright. Now let's try to pry them apart. I want to tell you, they were tangled. We had AMA officials, we had mechanics. Before it was over, I think they brought in a crane and a bulldozer to separate the motorcycles on the start. All the riders got up and walked away. Meanwhile, walking away from the pack was Jeff Emig. Said, I had enough of that following dust and all of that work trying to pass riders in the first moto, so he just showed him the short way around. Jeremy McGrath in second. There was Eric Kehoe in the number 3 spot. Here's the Englishman, James Dobb, running in the number 4 position. Want to see a great cross-up? Watch this. Jeff Emig over the top of the finish line jump shows the world how to do it at Redbud. Here are the top 5. Jeff Emig finishing in the number 1 position. As we pointed out, with a pair of moto wins, he was followed by McGrath, then Doug Henry was 3rd overall, James Dobb 4th. Good outing for the Englishman, Eric Kehoe rounding out the top 5. Point standings, Doug Henry still on top, but take a look at the gap between himself and Emig. Once it was 35 points, now down to 18. Kehoe in 4th, and Ezra Lusk holding down the 5th position. Round 6 of the championship series was in New Berlin, New York at the famed Unadilla racetrack. Unadilla, long touted as the toughest and nastiest and most unforgiving track in the United States, lived up to its reputation on this day. Suzuki's Ezra Lusk grabbed the hole shot. That's Scott Sheik running in the number 2 position. 3rd place was Jeff Emig, but not for long. There Emig drops back to 4th, and here Emig drops to the ground. He'll be passed by a passel of riders. He picks the Yamaha up. He kept it running and got back into the fray, but he had lost several positions. So out front, Ezra Lusk and James Dobb going at it. Now right behind them, number 16 is Doug Henry. He's in 3rd. That's Scott Sheik, who had dropped back to the number 4 position. There were battles going on all over this racetrack. Now this is Scott Sheik. He's dropped off the pace set by Doug Henry. He's currently holding the number 4 position. This is Larry Ward, rider number 9, looking for just a little bit of running room, and he found it as Sheik went wide in the corner, and Ward took advantage of the situation. Then the tough Unadilla track took advantage of Scott Sheik. He was down. He got going again, but as you'll soon see, Scott Sheik's troubles were really just beginning. Doug Henry, meanwhile, having problems of his own. His Honda had died, and what a place for it to die, in the middle of all of the banners. The mechanics trying to sort that thing out, but for Henry, it was going to be to no avail. He would finish 32nd in Moto number 1. His day was over. Meanwhile, there's the leader, and there goes James Dobb. He's the new leader. Ezra Lusk, astraddle of that huge berm that had been built up on the Unadilla track, couldn't get the Suzuki off that berm, and he lost a considerable amount of ground. Now, you remember Scott Sheik? He was the first rider to fall victim to the dusty conditions at Unadilla. Sucked his carburetor full of the stuff, as did Ezra Lusk. Meanwhile, James Dobb from England, rider number 100, takes the win in Moto number 1. Can he repeat? Well, we'll go next to Moto number 2, and we'll see. The gate goes down and the field is off. Now, hard to tell from this angle who's doing what, but take my word for it. Jeremy McGrath is out front. He's followed by James Dobb. Doug Henry was running 3rd, Eric Kehoe, then Jeff Emig. So all of the championship contenders were up front. Now notice the dust clouds. This was the big difference between Unadilla this year and in previous years. Normally, when the pros take to the track at Unadilla for practice, the track is, well, it's covered with 3 foot of grass. But this year, for the first time, amateurs were set to knock that grass down as they held an amateur national championship the day prior to the pros running at Unadilla. That left the track in, well, suspect conditions. Ward Robinson, the proprietor at Unadilla, says come back next year. You'll not see the same thing at all. We'll make that correction. Meanwhile, Jeremy McGrath out front. He's chased by Jeff Emig, and there's the battle for the number 3 position between Doug Henry and James Dobb. And James Dobb, the Englishman, ever so polite, moves over and lets Henry blast by to take over the number 3 position. About 10 laps in, Jeff Emig made that move, and he took over the lead from Jeremy McGrath. McGrath said thank you very much, and he rebounded to take back the number 1 slot. Jeff Emig, though, had his mind made up. He was tired of eating the roost in the dust from Jeremy McGrath, so on the very next corner, he again took over the number 1 position. Then it was Doug Henry's turn. Doug Henry took the limelight from his teammate as he captured the number 2 position, dropping McGrath back to 3rd. Now, Henry had scored no points in Moto number 1. In fact, the championship lead had dissolved, and between motos, he dropped back to 2nd place in the standings. With that pass on Jeff Emig, though, he would go on to take the number 1 position and hold it to the checkered flag, giving Henry the points lead back. Now, here's Henry sweeping toward the checkered flag. There's Emig on the outside. Henry takes the win in the moto. Emig finishes in the number 2 position. The overall win fell to James Dobb aboard the Pro Circuit Split-Fire Hot Wheels Kawasaki with a 1 and a 4. McGrath, Emig, Ward, and Kehoe rounded out the top 5.
Also, I'd just like to thank all the fans for coming and cheering me on. I know I'm from England, but it's a great helping all you Americans getting behind me. I do appreciate it. I feel that I am getting to be an American now, and I'd just like to thank Mike LaRocco and Mike Senior as well for all the help that they've given me in the last 2 weeks.
Next up, round 7 from Troy, Ohio. Here are the highlights as seen on Cycle World on Prime Network. Now, Ezra Lusk, rider number 43, will take the hole shot, but no one was watching. The attention of the crowd was focused on the rear of the pack where this major crash took place. Jeremy McGrath is involved. He'll be to the extreme left-hand side of your screen. The rider in green in the middle, that's James Dobb, the winner from Unadilla, the Englishman. Dobb broke his wrist. He's going to be out for the rest of the year. Jeremy McGrath was up and away, but a long way to go to be a factor in this first moto at Troy. Up front, it was Ezra Lusk holding the number 1 position with Jeff Emig in tow. Emig was not going to stay there long. He swept past Lusk to take over the number 1 position. Rider number 19 from out of the pack, Brian Swink, would end up 3rd. Here comes the finish. That's Doug Henry, who had moved to the number 2 slot, and he was right on Emig's rear wheels. What happened to Lusk? Well, he finished 33rd. Not a good outing in moto number 1. Let's go to the second moto highlights, and history will repeat itself. Jeremy McGrath will end up on the ground in corner number 1, and again, he'll have to start his trek. There's McGrath in the middle. Now he'll flash past the camera. He's going to be to the extreme outside of that corner. Several other riders went down, but pay no attention to them. The guy you want to watch is McGrath. He'll have to begin his trek toward the front, again from the rear of the pack. McGrath had a long, long day in Troy, Ohio. Meanwhile, Jeff Emig was holding down the number 1 position. Running into number 2 slot was Ezra Lusk. Now, you've heard of bad hair days? Well, Ezra Lusk was having a bad motorcycle day. For the second consecutive moto, Bainbridge, Georgia rider started up front and worked his way to the rear of the pack. His troubles are not yet over. Watch this. He gets into a shoving match with Jeremy McGrath. McGrath wins. He keeps on going while Lusk goes down for the count. He would end up in the number 11 position in moto number 2. At the head of the pack, Jeff Emig for Team Yamaha, the defending 125cc champ, was having things his way. We're going to show you a rider that was not having things his way. That was Scott Sheik. Why is he here, you say? He was not a factor in the race. Well, watch this and you'll see. Boom! It was just a nice little get-off, and we thought you would like to see it. Sheik got up and got back into the race action. He was okay. Here comes Jeff Emig to claim the checkered flag. Second moto win of the day. That's going to put Emig into the points lead. The defending champ is back on top. Doug Henry will collect his second place of the day as he pulls off the racetrack. So overall, it was Emig, Henry, Huffman, and McGrath in that order. Let's take a look at the point standings after 7 rounds. We're past the midway point where Jeff Emig has now moved to the top of the leaderboard. 280 points. Doug Henry is in second place, just 3 points back with 277. Then comes McGrath and Eric Kehoe. Glen Helen Off-Highway Vehicle Park in San Bernardino, California was the site of round 8 of the championship series, and it was the site of a brand new format in motocross. As a matter of fact, it's a format that has been around for a while, but in Supercross, heat races determine the lineup for the main event, and then only one main event rather than the 2 motos. Now, this is action from heat race number 1. Doug Henry is out front, but not for long. That's his teammate Jeremy McGrath doing the pushing and shoving, and he gets by to take over the number 1 position. McGrath will go on to take the win. Henry will finish in the number 2 position. Third place is the property of rider number 86. That's Damon Huffman out of Canyon Country, California. Here is the way they finished in heat race number 1. McGrath, again Henry, and Huffman rounding out the top 3. This is the second qualifying heat. Now the top 16 riders go from the heat races into the main event. Now watch the pileup in heat race number 2. You want to talk about a major traffic jam? Here it is. They were spread all over the corner. A couple of riders getting up and eyeing each other. That's Robbie Raynard, rider number 593. They're looking at each other like, that must have been your fault. Of course, the other guy says, it wasn't my fault. I wasn't anywhere around. This is the battle for the runner-up position. Eric Kehoe is currently in the number 2 slot, rider number 22. Jeff Emig, incidentally, is long gone, and that was our old friend Ezra Lusk. And Ezra, in going for the gold there and all of the gusto, tried to make the pass on Kehoe. He came up a little bit short, ran off the edge of the track. He ended up in the number 3 position. So Emig wins it. Kehoe, Lusk, and Swink, and another 12 riders beyond them qualify to go into the main event. Again, the top 16 out of each of the first 2 heat races go to the main. One final opportunity if you've not made the main. It's the last chance qualifier. We're only going to take 8 riders from the last chance qualifier, and it's rider number 777, Terry Parsons, followed by Todd DeHoop, taking the win. And those 2 riders will lead another 6 into the main. Brian Roth finished in the number 3 slot. Scott Sheik was 4th. At that point in time, you can bet that all 8 riders that did make it were just happy to be there. So one main event, it's worth double points instead of 25 points for winning each moto. You're going to get a total of 50 if you can win the main here at San Bernardino. Out of the gate and around corner number 1, the field was led by the familiar number 1 plate, the defending champ of Jeff Emig. The folks in the back of the pack, at least a couple of them, never got to appreciate that view. Now, right on Emig's rear wheel, rider number 16, Doug Henry. Now, they're 1-2 in the series, and they're 1-2 in this single moto affair at San Bernardino. That positioning is about to change. Watch this. I don't know. Did Henry cut him off, or did Emig just get a little too close on the inside? Here it is again. Looks like that contact may have been initiated when Henry came across the front of Jeff Emig. Well, we'll never know. All is fair in love and war and motocross. Jeff Emig picked himself up off the ground. He was in the number 2 position at that point. Emig is not going to stay there. Out front, it's Doug Henry. Now, Henry has been the picture of consistency throughout the season. Take a look at the overall finishes. In Gainesville, a 4th. He took his only win of the season in Southwick. He then followed that with a pair of 2nd places, then a 3rd. His worst outing was at Unadilla when he had a DNF for a 32nd place finish in Moto number 1. Now, that's the reason that Jeff Emig was not able to hold on to that number 2 position. He was riding along and his motorcycle started to sputter and just died. Now, Emig had given up, took off his goggles. Now watch this. He should have been kicking that motorcycle for all he was worth, but he let up on the track. I suspect he just suffered a slight mental letdown. He finally got it going again, and he would end up in the number 4 position and probably would not have been able to do any better than that had he gotten the bike fired right away. But still, that's not what you want to do on a motocross track in the heat of battle. Doug Henry takes the win, and look who finished 2nd, Ezra Lusk. When Ezra keeps the motorcycle upright, this guy is tough. Here's the way 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th finished. It was Ryan Hughes, McGrath, Kehoe, and Larry Ward. Now, after the main event was over, I'm going to tell you, Doug Henry had some problems. It was awfully hot in San Bernardino, and it affected Henry. Henry later said it was a combination of heat and smog that got to him. Well, I'm going to tell you, that guy was in rough shape. That's Jim Holly that's administering first aid. Holly was the Prime Network color analyst, along with Bevo Forte, dumping water on his head. Holly was there to, well, do an interview. Instead, he helped with the undressing. Now, the win put Henry back into the number 1 position in the points standings. Let's hear what he has to say about the heat.
Yeah, it was really bad. It really didn't hit me till about 3 or 4 laps ago, you know. People were cheering for me, you know, it was great. You can hear them now, boy. It was really great out here. There are a lot of fans out here.
The Pacific Northwest, Washougal, Washington, was the site of round 9 of the 125cc Championship Series. Here are the highlights as seen on Prime Network. Moto number 1, it was all Jeff Emig. Emig, as a matter of fact, looked behind him a time or two, wondering where the rest of the field went, and he saw no one. He was just flat gone. Running into number 2 position, Ezra Lusk, in the 2nd consecutive week, rider number 43 aboard his Suzuki, was keeping the motorcycle upright and cutting a swath through this track and through lap riders. Holding down to number 3 position was rider number 19, Brian Swink. There was Swink. He was being chased by Jeremy McGrath, and in 5th place, number 16, was Doug Henry. But out front, it was all Jeff Emig. He took moto number 1 in a laugher. And you know what? He did the same thing in moto number 2. There goes Emig from the middle of the pack. Emig steals the hole shot, and he is flat gone. Emig could have looked around for the closest competitor. Had he taken time to do that, he'd have seen no one. Looking way back in the track, he might have seen Ezra Lusk for the second consecutive moto. Lusk was putting it all together. The Team Suzuki star managed to stay upright one more time, and he would sweep to his third second place in as many races. Rider number 27 is John Dowd. The 250cc National Championship Series was over, and those riders without 500cc mounts had to do something the rest of the year. So Dowd and a whole flock of others, including Damon Bradshaw, turned their talents toward the 125 class. The talents, though, of Jeff Emig gave the Team Yamaha star the overall win for the day and a pair of moto wins, followed by a pair of seconds in Ezra Lusk and Jeremy McGrath with a 4-3. Then came Doug Henry with a 5th and a 4th. So the lead changed hands one more time. Emig, with 4 wins, was again on top of the leaderboard, with Henry just 5 points behind, then McGrath and Eric Kehoe.
Jeremy McGrath, Ezra Lusk, and Jeff Emig, your 125 class champions.
Spring Creek Motocross Park in Millville, Minnesota was the site of round 10 of the National Championship Series. It's also the site of one of the nastiest sections of whoop-de-doos anywhere in the United States. Coming through the pack, 2-time world champion Donnie Schmidt, who hails from Bloomington, Minnesota. What was Donnie Schmidt doing at Millville, Minnesota? Well, we asked him earlier in the day.
This year I kind of had a bad year, and I felt that I maybe have lost some of my speed since I went to Europe, and I think it's going to help me a little bit to improve my speed, and especially riding with the 125 guys, the young guys, really aggressive. I'm riding 3 nationals, so hopefully I can, learn a little bit. Never too old to learn, and maybe get some good finishes also.
Well, a good finish in Moto number 1 was 8th place overall. Not too shabby for a man that's been away from United States motocross for as many years as Donnie had. Out front, familiar figures, Jeff Emig, but Emig did not stay there very long. As a matter of fact, at that point in the track, Emig fell on 2 occasions. Well, he's going to pick himself up and still manage to finish in the number 2 position. He'll be chasing his old nemesis, the guy that has been in the lead more often than not in the championship series, Doug Henry, rider number 16. Finishing in the number 2 slot, as I said, was Emig. 3rd place went to Jeremy McGrath. With the second moto about to get underway, take note of the track conditions. Now, earlier in the day, that was nothing but a quagmire, a sea of mud. It had rained 2 days prior at Millville. The track crew at Millville did an excellent job. Around the corner, that big sweeping right-hander. A good start for Jeff Emig 2 times in a row. Emig is out front and leading the rest of the field. Now look at this nasty set of whoops. You ever seen anything like that in your life? And the lines change each time the riders come through those sections. Now, some bikes will spit a little sand up and throw sand one direction or another. The next time the guy comes through, it's completely different, and it is just one of the nastiest motocross sections in the United States. For Donnie Schmidt, the day ended early in Moto number 2. He was involved in a crash. The pipe was crushed. He lost all power on the Yamaha. Color him gone. Back to the front of the pack, watch Ezra Lusk. He just moved into the number 2 position. Now, that was not a lack of concentration, I assure you. That was just the nastiness of that Millville track. It is one tough track, voted in the eyes of some riders as the toughest track to ride in America. Back in the bushes, that's Doug Henry. Now, that's a mistake that you do not see too often, at least from Doug Henry. He ran off the edge of the track. Henry would get back up and still finish in the number 2 position. At the head of the pack, Jeff Emig was checkered flag bound. He would win Moto number 2, giving him the overall win for the day. There were no mistakes in that second moto. So it was Jeff Emig with a 2-1 score, wrapping up the overall, followed by Doug Henry with a 1-2, then Jeremy McGrath and Ezra Lusk with good rides to finish 4th overall. With 2 events to go, Jeff Emig with 5 wins is on top of the championship points leaderboard, followed by Doug Henry. Jeremy McGrath out of contention, as is Ezra Lusk in 4th. Round 11, Binghamton, New York, as seen on Prime Network. Here are the 125cc highlights. The gate dropped on Moto number 1. It would be Doug Henry capturing the whole shot, followed by Emig, Ryan Hughes, Todd DeHoop, Ezra Lusk, and Jeremy McGrath. The back part of the pack, little altercation going on. Robbie Raynard was one of the riders involved, and despite the time spent arguing over who was at fault, Raynard would pick himself up and finish 7th in the moto. Out front, it was Doug Henry, followed by Jeff Emig. Holding down the number 3 position was Ezra Lusk. Then came Jeremy McGrath. A few corners later, and Emig was gone. Still on the opening lap, the front end washed out from under his Yamaha, he hit the ground, had to pick himself up and start working through traffic. Now, McGrath had passed Ezra Lust, but watch this. McGrath makes a rare mistake on a motocross track. And Ezra Lust repasses to regain the number 2 position. While that was going on, Jeff Emig was on the gas. He was passing lap riders at a rather rapid clip, and he would work all the way up to the number 4 slot before the moto was over. McGrath moved back around Lust to take control of the number 2 slot, while Ryan Hughes also passed Lust. He was turning in his best moto of the season, and he would end up in the number 3 position. Meanwhile, it was rider number 16, Doug Henry, taking the checkered flag. Moto number 2 and a surprise hole shot by Jimmy Gaddis. Earlier in the season, Gaddis had captured the 125cc Western Supercross Championship, had not been a factor in the outdoor season to date, but he was certainly a factor in the opening laps of Moto number 2 here at Broome Tioga. Did not stay there long as Doug Henry swept around Gaddis to take control of the number 1 position. Now, toward the end of the moto, Henry had company. His teammate, Jeremy McGrath, was camped on his rear wheel. Team tactics involved here? Who knows, but McGrath made no effort to pass. Coming up in the number 3 position is Robbie Raynard. With just a couple of laps to go, Raynard would be camped on the rear wheel of the leaders. Jeff Emig, all the way from the back of the pack, had moved up to 5th. Now here's the finish. There's Doug Henry and McGrath holding off Robbie Raynard. They finished that float. The overall win goes to Doug Henry with a pair of moto victories. Jeremy McGrath was 2nd. Ryan Hughes, his best performance of the season, was 3rd. And Robbie Raynard finished 4th overall. Finishing 5th was Jeff Emig. So after 11 of 12 events, just 1 to go, Doug Henry is on top of the leaderboard with 458, then Jeff Emig with 447. The number 1 plate in the 125cc National Championship Series would be decided in the final round. Jeff Emig, the defending champion, was in the position of the pursuer. The rider he was pursuing, Doug Henry, the series points leader. For Emig, it was familiar territory. 1 year earlier, with 2 rounds to go, Emig was 48 points behind Mike LaRocco. He closed the gap and won the championship by 19. With the first moto underway, Ezra Lust, rider number 43, was in an all-too-familiar position. It was not Lust's fault, but Ezra Lust would be at the tail end of the pack. Todd DeHoop was the leader, followed by Raynard, then Swink, then Emig, and Doug Henry. In the number 6 position came Jeremy McGrath. Now, common sense dictates when you have an 11-point lead and you're down to the season finale that if you can keep your eye on the guy that's chasing you in the points, if you can stay right behind him, then you'll wrap up the title. But that's not the way Doug Henry played it in Moto number 1. He was content to follow for a while, but when the opportunity presented, Doug Henry whipped the throttle up and went for the glory and the gold. He tried this pass and made it stick. Doug Henry was now in front of his closest competitor in the championship chase. Is that a good place to be with the title on the line? I'll let you make that decision. Todd DeHoop, meanwhile, was holding down the number 1 position in admirable fashion. Doug Henry had passed Robbie Raynard to take over the number 2 position. Raynard was in 3rd and Emig back in 4th. When Raynard went wide, Emig cut to the inside off a jump to take over the number 3 position. He kept the momentum up and swept by Doug Henry to take over the number 2 slot. So it was Todd DeHoop out front, Jeff Emig in 2nd, and in 3rd it was Doug Henry. 4th belongs to Raynard, then DeHoop bobbled, and Emig swept into the number 1 position. Now remember, there are 11 points separating Jeff Emig and Doug Henry in the championship chase. They flashed through the mechanics signal area. The excitement was evident by all as Henry took a wide line around the outside of Todd DeHoop, and now Henry is in the number 2 position. So with Emig out front and Henry in 2nd, watch this. Henry overcooked a corner and shot off the end of the track. That could have been the end of the title chase. The first order of business for Henry was picking up the motorcycle, then praying it would start, and it did on the first kick. Henry joined the fray. He had lost several positions, but would you believe this? By the end of the moto, Henry would have worked back to the number 2 position. Emig took the win, and with it, the valuable points for first place. Now here's the way they finished in Moto number 1. It was Jeff Emig on top. Doug Henry, after that near disastrous crash, worked back up to 2nd. Then Brian Swink and Jeremy McGrath rounding out the top 4. Let's take a look at the points difference. 480 after the first moto for Doug Henry. Jeff Emig 472, an 8-point margin as Emig gained 3. The final moto of the 125cc National Championship season. Watch the rider on the extreme right side of your screen, the right end of the starting gate. That's Doug Henry. Watch what happens. Henry is caught in the gate. That's exactly what Jeff Emig needed to win the championship. Now, where is Emig? Now watch the highlighted portion of the screen. There is Emig at the tail end of the pack. Now coming up, you'll see where Doug Henry is. There's Henry. Henry is dead last, and just in front of him is Jeff Emig. Now the two riders, as the moto progressed, worked their way through traffic. Henry was never out of sight of Jeff Emig. He could always see his nemesis, so he knew exactly where he was as the moto wore on. Out front, not that anyone was paying attention, Robbie Raynard holding down the #1 position, being chased by Ezra Lusk. The eyes of the crowd were drawn to the back part of the racetrack as the two championship contenders began dicing through traffic. Henry caught Jeff Emig, then made the pass. By the end of the moto, Henry would work up to 6th with Emig in 7th. The moto win, though, would fall to the youngster, Robbie Raynard, the rookie, and with the moto win would come the overall victory. Behind Raynard, the championship was still up for grabs, but just barely. With that checkered flag, Doug Henry was declared the 1993 125cc national champ. Robbie Raynard took the overall win at Delmont, Pennsylvania. Jeff Emig with moto finishes of 1-7 finished 2nd overall. Doug Henry was 3rd overall with moto finishes of 2-6. Here's a look at the final standings with Henry declared 1993 champ. Let's hear what the new champion has to say.
How good does it feel, Doug?
Feels great, you know, especially with all these people here. I'm glad all the people came down. And I know I had a lot of fans there. I'm glad I was able to win the championship.
What went through your head when you got caught in the gate?
Well, I knew I could still win, you know, or, you know, I knew I'd be able to move up quick, you know, even though I got a bad start, but I fell over there in the first lap, and I was really nervous from there on.
With the 125cc championship decided, we'll take the fast track to victory back to Gatorback Cycle Park in Gainesville, Florida, the site of the opening rounds of the 1993 motocross season. Next up, the quest for the 250 crown. No rider has ever won 4 250cc national motocross championships. As the 1993 season got underway at Gatorback Cycle Park in Florida, 3-time and defending champ Jeff Stanton had high hopes. His closest competition figured to be Yamaha's Damon Bradshaw. The Mooresville, North Carolina rider is touted as the fastest and most aggressive rider on the circuit today. Could a newcomer to the ranks of the 250 class be a threat? Phil Lawrence, newly signed by Team Suzuki, says yes. Team Kawasaki's efforts are captained by Mike Kiedrowski. Kiedrowski has 2 125 titles to his credit, as well as the 500 crown earned just 1 year ago. When the gate dropped in the season opener, those riders plus the rest of the field thundered toward corner #1 with Mike Kiedrowski leading the way. Kiedrowski was the dominant force. He easily won both motos. For Bradshaw, rider #8, a crash in the first moto led to a 10th place finish. He fared better in moto #2, eventually settling for 2nd place. Jeff Stanton, the defending champion, suffered a similar fate. From well off the pace in moto #1, he finished 2nd. A crash in moto #2 put him at the back of the pack, where he battled all the way to 4th. Newcomer Phil Lawrence enjoyed a profitable day, moto finishes of 3rd and 5th. John Dowd, a privateer from Chicopee, Massachusetts, turned in an outstanding effort, finished 4th and 3rd. Mike Kiedrowski takes one of his 2 checkered flags on the day to take the overall finish in the 250cc class. The points earned in both motos or races are combined to determine overall finishing positions for the day. Those same points later in the season will determine the national champion. At Gatorback, the season opener, Kiedrowski, with a pair of moto wins, took the win, followed by Stanton, Dowd, Lawrence, and Bradshaw. The treacherous sand track at Southwick, Massachusetts was the site of round 2 of the national championship competition in the 250cc class. First corner victim, rider #21, it's going to be Steve Lamson. He ended up on the ground. Team Honda mechanics jumping out to help Lamson right the motorcycle. He was okay back into the fray, but out of contention. Thrilling the crowd was rider number 27. He took the whole shot. That was John Dowd from Chicopee, Massachusetts. That's Damon Bradshaw holding down the number 4 position. In between those two riders in second place was Jeff Stanton. He didn't stay there long as he rocketed by Dowd in the early going to take over the lead. In third place, rider number 3, the winner at Gainesville, Mike Kiedrowski. Like Stanton, Kiedrowski quickly disposed of John Dowd. Then those two riders, Jeff Stanton in the lead, Kiedrowski running second, immediately opened a huge lead on the rest of the field. Throughout Moto number 1, the pair would battle for supremacy in the 250cc class. Stanton showing the way, Kiedrowski following. If there was a surprise in this early going of the 250cc season, it was not that Kiedrowski was so close. It was the absence of Damon Bradshaw. He had figured to be a contender in the class, but Bradshaw had slid off the pace and was running in 5th. The battle for third place was contested between Mike LaRocco, he's in 3rd at the present time, and John Dowd, who had dropped back to 4th. LaRocco did not ride at Gainesville due to an ailing wrist. He was back at the sands of Southwick, though, in rare form. Final lap, it's all Jeff Stanton. Mike Kiedrowski had disappeared from the picture. Kiedrowski, in an effort to pass Stanton, gave it just a little too much gas. He lost control of his Kawasaki and was spit off the motorcycle. He did recover quickly, in fact, in time to finish in the runner-up position. Here's Mike.
Yeah, I was going about 25 minutes. I was going down just because of the mechanics area, and my bike kind of hit one braking bump, hit the other one, and kind of went sideways and just kind of threw me off the side. And you know, sometimes that happens, but I still ended up second, and there's still another moto left, so I can still get the overall.
If Mike Kiedrowski and Jeff Stanton were to swap positions in Moto number 2, they would end the day tied in points. The overall win, however, would go to Kiedrowski by virtue of the fact that he did the better job in the second moto. Here's the start of Moto number 2, and some things never change. There will be a crash in corner number 1 and a near crash near the front of the pack as Brian McElroy saved a vicious swap. And of course, here is the crash at the tail end of the pack. Up front, it was Greg Bowen grabbing the whole shot. Jeff Stanton was in tow, then Phil Lawrence, Mike Kiedrowski running 4th. Buried mid-pack was the crowd favorite, John Dowd from Bolton, Connecticut. The defending champ wasted no time in putting distance between himself and the rest of the field. That was his objective. Unfortunately, Phil Lawrence and Mike Kiedrowski had followed suit in passing Bowen, and they were soon hot on Stanton's tail. Kiedrowski disposed of Phil Lawrence, and the running order was Jeff Stanton out front, Mike Kiedrowski second with Lawrence 3rd. First 2 positions, that's the way they had finished in Moto number 1. Stanton, of course, hoping for a repeat. Mike Kiedrowski, though, is not going to cooperate. Now watch this. Kiedrowski cut to the inside. He carried that line all the way to that big fall-away jump. He made the pass. He took over the number 1 position. So now it's Kiedrowski out front with Stanton second. That's the way the moto ended. The overall win went to Mike Kiedrowski with 2-1 moto finishes. Then Stanton, LaRocco, John Dowd, Phil Lawrence rounding out the top 5. Out of the picture was Damon Bradshaw. The Team Yamaha rider, one of the early favorites to take the crown, finished 9th overall with a 5th and an 11th. After 2 rounds, the point standings looked like this. Kiedrowski on top, Jeff Stanton second. The privateer riding his Kawasaki, John Dowd, was 3rd. Round 3 of the 8th race 250cc National Championship Motocross Series took place at High Point Raceway in Mount Morris, Pennsylvania. It was Damon Bradshaw's best outing of the season. The Team Yamaha star from Mooresville, North Carolina, would finish second in Moto number 1 and would capture Moto number 2. Jeff Stanton, on the other hand, the defending champ, was well back in the pack in both motos. He would take a 5th in Moto number 1 and a 4th in Moto number 2. He did not have a typical Jeff Stanton day. Mike LaRocco, rider number 5 from LaPorte, Indiana, turned in moto finishes of 3 and 2 to finish 3rd overall. This is the battle for the number 1 position as the pair of riders head for the finish line. Mike Kiedrowski leading the way. Damon Bradshaw tucked in behind. When they reached the checkered flag, it was not quite that close. Bradshaw did finish second with Kiedrowski taking the win. In Moto number 2, it was all Damon Bradshaw. He grabbed the whole shot and was not headed.
Yeah, I'm real happy to, like I said this morning, I'm real happy to come back to Mount Morris, and it feels really good to ride in front of this crowd this morning. I didn't quite know if they were behind me like they normally would, but when I did that parade lap, man, those people really made me feel good, and I have to give that win to them. They did it for me, they cheered me along, and that's what kept me going.
Here's a look at the overall finishes at Mount Morris. Damon Bradshaw on top, Kiedrowski, LaRocco, Stanton, and Cooper Stanton had an opportunity to pick up some points on Mike Kiedrowski in that second moto, but was not able to take advantage of the situation. So after 3 rounds, 2 wins for Kiedrowski, 1 for Bradshaw, none for Stanton. That's the way the scores look. Sacramento, California, the famed Hangtown racetrack. It was the silver anniversary running of that event, and it was back on schedule for Mike Kiedrowski in his quest for the 250cc title. Kiedrowski is gone. Meanwhile, at the back of the pack, Lance Smale and Ray Somo having their problems. Look what happened just ahead of them. Damon Bradshaw went down. He twisted his clutch lever, bent the front brake. He would have problems the rest of the moto. Behind Kiedrowski, the battle for the number 2 position was between Steve Lamson, number 21, and number 32, Buddy Antunez. Lamson took the measure of Antunez. Antunez faded even further back as Jeff Stanton now comes up to challenge the Honda of Antunez. It's the factory versus the privateer. The factory wins, and why not? Stanton blasts into the number 3 position. Stanton riding with an ailing back that was injured in a practice crash earlier in the week. Now it's Guy Cooper's turn, rider number 7. He watched what went on in front of him and said, hey, Antunez appears to be easy pickings today, so Cooper is going to take his crack at young Buddy Antunez, and Cooper, like Lamson and Stanton before him, would prevail, and he takes over the number 4 position. Now, Cooper would not be able to maintain that 4th. Mike LaRocco will get him before the moto is over. Where is LaRocco? Well, he was back in the pack. LaRocco was not noted for good starts, and at Hangtown in moto number 1, he had one of his usual. He was well back in the pack, but charging, and LaRocco working through the pack would end up in the number 4 slot. Meanwhile, let's turn our attention to the battle for the number 2 position at the head of the pack. Jeff Stanton takes the measure of Steve Lamson. It's Stanton now running in the number 2 position. Don't forget Mike Kiedrowski. He's way out front and long gone. For the battle for the number 6 and 7 slots, it's rider number 17, Larry Brooks, and John Dowd, rider number 27. Now, Larry Brooks, aboard his no-lean, tough racing Yamaha, is in the number 6 position. He was in the number 6 position. Let's drop him back to 7. He'll hold that spot until the checkered flag as Dowd breaks into 6th. Damon Bradshaw was on the gas as much as you can be on the gas with a front brake that continually was locking up. Bradshaw suffered that problem throughout the moto. Worked up to 20th place. That's as far as Damon Bradshaw would get. Meanwhile, Mike Kiedrowski was out front. He was on the proverbial cruise control. He's headed for the checkered flag. One more trip through the mechanic signal area. Can't imagine what the signboard read at that late stage of the race. It's just about 50 foot down the track. He took the checker and moto number 1. A lot of positions changed in that moto. Let's catch us up to date. It's Mike Kiedrowski, Stanton, Lamson, LaRocco, and Guy Cooper finishing 5th. Second moto, all Mike Kiedrowski one more time. He took the whole shot, said goodbye to the rest of the field, and no one from that point would get a smell. Steve Lamson, rider number 21, was up front in the early going. Mike LaRocco, with about a mid-pack start, would have to play catch-up one more time. And here's an all-too-familiar sight. If your name is Jeff Stanton, it's having to make a couple of passes to get in contention for the lead. Again, he's dueling with his teammate, Steve Lamson. Stanton will make the pass before the moto is over. Lamson will get back by Stanton, and Stanton will fade slightly due to that injured back we talked about earlier. That was Mike LaRocco, rider number 5, taking the measure of number 7, Guy Cooper. So with that pass made, we'll go back to the battle for the number 2 position. If you recall, just a few corners ago, Jeff Stanton had wrested that spot away from his teammate Steve Lamson, and now it's Lamson's turn to return the favor. Stanton with an injured back. That back injury would effectively take him out of the hunt for the series championship. He would stay in for one more round, then drop out of contention. Lamson makes the pass. He takes over the number 2 position. Stanton is not finished, going backwards. Here comes Mike LaRocco. As you watch Jeff Stanton, you'll see he gives this pass up. He gives up that position, I should say, without a struggle. He lets LaRocco go by. And I'll tell you, when Jeff Stanton does that, Jeff Stanton is hurting. The pass is made. LaRocco is in 3rd. Stanton is in 4th. That's the way they will finish the moto. At the head of the pack, Mike Kiedrowski looking for his 3rd victory in 4 races. There will be 4 races remaining in the series after he takes the checkered flag. There it is, and the series has reached and passed the midway point. Kiedrowski with 1-1 finishes. It was Lamson with a 3-2, Stanton 2-4, Mike LaRocco 4-3, John Dowd rounding out the top 5. The way it looks after 4 races have been run. Kedrowski with 3 wins, 192 points. A lot of distance between himself and Stanton in second. The privateer Dowd still holds on to third. Redbud Track and Trail, Buchanan, Michigan, the site of round 5 of the 250cc National Championship Series. Redbud is in the backyard of 2 prominent riders, Jeff Stanton, who is from nearby Sherwood, Michigan, and Mike LaRocco, who lives just south of Buchanan, Michigan, in LaPorte, Indiana. I'll tell you what, though, the star of the show, at least in the early going, was rider number 12, Jeff Matasevich. I've not seen a lot of Matasevich this year. He's on a brand new ride from Team Suzuki and had not really gotten the hang of that motorcycle. It looked like, though, at round 5 in Redbud that things were shaping up. Not to be. Matasevich would be passed by rider number 21, Steve Lamson, in the early going, and following suit after Lamson would come Mike Kedrowski. It was just 1 year ago at this Redbud track that Kedrowski scored his first ever 250cc National Championship win, so the track holds fond memories for the Team Kawasaki ace and championship points leader. Rider number 5, Mike LaRocco, he would finish second in the moto, followed by Jeff Stanton. Taking the checkered flag was Mike Kedrowski. Moto number 2, the killer from Canyon Country, California, and series points leader Kedrowski looking for a repeat of moto number 1, and you know what? He found it. Jeff Matasevich, rider number 12, with another great hole shot, holding off the charge of Kedrowski in the early going. Behind Kedrowski, rider number 1, the defending champ, Jeff Stanton. Stanton would drop back 1 position. You had a flash of green there, and that green provided by Mike LaRocco. LaRocco was going to pass Stanton to take over second. Once again, Stanton not riding 100% due to that back injury. Finish line, Mike Kedrowski with hands raised takes the win. Champagne Circle was enjoyed by Kedrowski, the overall winner. Stanton and LaRocco, they're neighbors of that Redbud track, as we said earlier today, and the fans were happy to have them on the victory roster. Here's the way they finished at Redbud. Kedrowski with a 1-1, then Mike LaRocco with a 2-2, Stanton with a 3-3, Lamson finished 4th, and John Dowd, the privateer, took the number 5 position. Point standings after 5 rounds of competition. Mike Kedrowski, 4 wins, 242 points, a whopping 41-point lead over Jeff Stanton. He just about has the series wrapped up, and Stanton is out of it from this point on with that ailing back. At Unadilla, round 6 of 8, the championship series pretty much belonged, as we earlier alluded, to Mike Kedrowski. Let's take a look at Kedrowski's record to date. In the previous races run, Kedrowski at Gatorback finished 1st. Southwick, he was 1st. His worst showing of the season? How about that? A 2nd place at Mount Morris, Pennsylvania. He came back with 2 more 1st places at Hangtown and Redbud. What did Mike LaRocco think of the situation? Well, he gives a big yawn and says, hey, doesn't impress me. Jeff Stanton, shown here at one of the earlier races of the season, was not at the Unadilla Grand Prix, and it's a shame because Jeff is good at Unadilla. 90, 91, and 92, he won the 250cc U.S. Grand Prix. Team manager Dave Arnold tells us why.
Pulled a muscle in his back 3 weeks ago at the Las Vegas Supercross, and he's gone to the last 2 nationals, one at Sacramento and the other at Redbud, Michigan last week, with his back still kind of out of place, and what it's done is put an additional load on the other muscles to where it's been really seizing up his back, and the muscles contracting and making the pain actually worse and worse as weeks go on. But he's been advised by the doctors to take a couple weekends off and try to let the back relax a little bit and get a little bit of therapy on it, and hopefully be back for the next national at Troy.
Stanton, in fact, would miss Troy and the final round of the 250cc National Championship Series. Moto number 1 at Unadilla, a horrendous crash in corner number 1. The leader is Damon Bradshaw at this point, and Bradshaw is down. He's going to be hit by a couple of riders that were not able to avoid Bradshaw.
We were going in the first turn. I got off to a good start like I wanted to, and went in there and the front end of the bike washed out. When it did, I did something to my wrist. I'm not really sure yet. I think I hopefully just jammed it, but it was sore enough to where I kind of would have wasted my time to try to go back out there. I tried holding on, sitting on the bike, and when I squeezed it and put pressure on it, it hurt too bad. So instead of messing it up any worse, I'm just going to go to the doctor first thing Monday morning and see what's going on.
Let's go to the second corner, still on the opening lap. Now watch this crash. Mike Kedrowski taken out by Scott Myers. We're going to see this again. To the left, it's Cliff Palmer, rider number 20. He was hit, and he too was down. Now watch Kiedrowski. He's off the side of the track. He starts to cut back across the track. Scott Myers had nowhere to go. He clipped Kiedrowski's rear wheel, and Kiedrowski was down and out of it. None of the three riders injured. They were all up and back into it. Meanwhile, John Dowd was way out front. Mike LaRocco was second. And watch Guy Cooper as he tries to pass Matasevic. He gets shoved outside the berm, almost loses it, but brought it back into control. Dowd was doing a great job. This is just the end of lap number 1, and look at the lead he had over Mike LaRocco, and look at the way the field was spread out. Here comes Cooper. He finally got the drive and the line that he needed to take over the number 3 position, and that drops Matasevic back to 4th. Second lap, same spot. Steve Lamson had watched Cooper make the pass. He used the same line. He goes into 4th place. Matasevic now back into the number 5 position. Now, Matasevic would hold 5th through the remainder of the race. Lamson, though, was not through with his charge. Coming up, Lamson will be on the rear wheel of Guy Cooper, and he'll make the pass. Here they are. This is the battle for the number 3 position. Lamson and Cooper side by side. That's one of the roughest parts of the Unadilla track. But Lamson ironed out the bumps. He made the pass. Here comes Mike Kiedrowski after picking himself up after the altercation in the second corner. He really cut a wide swath and a fast swath through the traffic. He just passed Jeff Matasevic. He's currently running in the number 5 position. With the adrenaline flowing, he quickly caught Guy Cooper just a few corners later, and just like that, Mike Kiedrowski is in 4th. Now keep the championship points race in mind. Mike Kiedrowski has a huge lead over the rest of the field. His nearest competitor, Jeff Stanton, is on the sidelines. So Kiedrowski really did not have to work as hard as he worked in Moto number 1 at Unadilla. As a matter of fact, some wiser minds might have said, slow down just a little bit. Do not risk life and limb. Take a 4th, take a 5th, take a 6th, but don't risk crashing. But Kiedrowski bulldozed his way to the front of the pack. With that pass on Steve Lamson, Kiedrowski had taken over the number 3 position. Ahead of Kiedrowski, the battle for the lead was raging. You'll recall rider number 27, John Dowd, the privateer, at one time had a huge lead over Mike LaRocco. Well, that lead was gone, and out of Gravity Cavity, Mike LaRocco got the drive and won the drag race to the next corner. Here's another look at the pass. The key was the downhill portion of Gravity Cavity. That's where Mike LaRocco grabbed a handful of throttle. He had the drive and momentum coming out. LaRocco was able to control the Kawasaki after that hard landing, and he takes over 1st place. For John Dowd, the problems were just beginning. A few corners later, Dowd would be out of the race. The Bolton, Connecticut rider, the hometown favorite, was a victim of the severe dust conditions at Unadilla. Mike LaRocco was home free in Moto number 1. The checkered flag awaits, and LaRocco from LaPorte, Indiana, the Team Kawasaki ace, had scored the win. Mike Kiedrowski all the way up to the number 2 position by the time the checkered flag was thrown. Lamson finished 3rd, followed by Guy Cooper, then Jeff Matasevic. In the second moto, Mike Kiedrowski's fortunes were slightly different. As a matter of fact, instead of starting at the rear of the pack like he did in Moto number 1, Kiedrowski got the whole shot and led the field through the dusty and treacherous Unadilla course. Kiedrowski had a huge lead with less than a lap down. Rider number 21, Steve Lamson, was in 2nd. Mike LaRocco, with a good start, was up to 3rd. At this point in time, LaRocco looked like he had the momentum and the drive as he was coming from out of the pack, but that corner took care of that. We'll go back and take another look from another angle. Watch LaRocco. He just misses the berm. It looked like, or washed the front end out. For whatever reason, only LaRocco knows, and LaRocco now being passed by Guy Cooper. But watch this. Cooper says, what's going on here? And he got off the gas just a little bit, and LaRocco was able to blast back by Cooper. That never should have happened. Cooper should have been able to hold on to that number 3 position. Cooper, though, with only 1 race remaining in a very illustrious career, who could fault the Stillwater, Oklahoma rider for maybe slacking off just a little bit on that very rough course. Not slacking off at all was Mike Kiedrowski. He's headed for the home stretch and the win in Moto number 2 that will give him the overall honors for the day. Mike LaRocco managed to pick himself up and a catch one more time. Steve Lamson, this time he made the pass stick to sweep into the number 2 position. Checkered flag time. There's the familiar figure with the arms in the air and pumping, and Kiedrowski had claimed victory in the moto. As we said, the overall honors for the day, LaRocco, Lamson, Dowd, and Brooks finishing in the top 5 in moto number 2. And here's the way the overall honors stacked up. Kiedrowski, LaRocco, Lamson, Guy Cooper finishing 4th overall. Here are the point standings after 6 rounds. Kiedrowski with 5 wins, way out in front. Round 7 of the 8-race series, Kenworthy's Motocross Park in Troy, Ohio. An opportunity for Mike Kiedrowski to wrap up the 1993 250cc National Championship. Kiedrowski is way out front. Let's take a look at some of the action in the back of the pack. A big tumble there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 riders involved. They're all okay and up and into it, but they're out of it as far as the race is concerned. Kiedrowski is gone. Say goodbye. Mike LaRocco's in 2nd place. He's not going to catch the killer out front. Holding down 3rd, Jeff Matasevich. 4th, the property of Steve Lamson. Here comes the checkered flag. Mike Kiedrowski patting old paint. That's his motorcycle. He's being congratulated by his mechanic and hugged. Why? Well, Kiedrowski has wrapped up the 250cc title. Moto 2, well, it was just a little bit of frosting on the cake. Kiedrowski again blast to the front. It was a carbon copy, and when it's a carbon copy, you need a crash at the rear. And there it is. Looks like the same 3 or 4 riders that were involved in the first moto. Kiedrowski is headed for the checkered flag. He had absolutely no competition in this one, and what a day for the young man as he sweeps to the first ever 250cc national title of his career. Mike LaRocco again in tow, and Kiedrowski is going to take his 6th overall win of the national championship season. Now, all was not well for Kiedrowski. Look at him. He looks a little peaked there, doesn't he? He doesn't really look too happy with the way things are going. Reason is, the heat got to him. It was well over 100 degrees at Troy, and I guess the excitement of the moment and winning the championship got to Mike. But look at this. The crowd cheering and clapping. How about that? Kiedrowski raises the arm in the air. A little smile for those in attendance from the ambulance crew. He's loaded in. They'll take him in for a checkup. He was all right. Kiedrowski takes the overall win. LaRocco finishes 2nd, then Lamson and Cooper. Let's take a look at the point standings after 7 of 8 events. Mike Kiedrowski with an 84-point lead. At the season finale, a maximum of 50 points can be earned. The title belongs to the killer. Glen Helen Off-Highway Vehicle Park in San Bernardino, California was the site of the final round of the 250cc National Championship motocross season. The motorcycle being worked on belongs to Mike Kiedrowski. Kiedrowski, though, was not there to supervise the action. In a practice crash, Kiedrowski hurt himself and was taken to the hospital for observation and for a checkup. It was in question at the time that video was shot whether or not Kiedrowski would return. Now here's some home video taken of the crash. That was it. It was pretty violent. We're going to see it a couple of more times, but Kiedrowski was dashed to the ground very hard and was knocked unconscious. Now you'll see Kiedrowski start to move, start to try to crawl off the track, but believe me, he was unaware of what was going on at the time. There it is again. He rolls over on his neck, and actually, the extent of the injuries, they could have been much more serious than they actually turned out to be. But Kiedrowski would miss the final round of the season. He suffered a concussion, a wrench back, and a severely lacerated tongue. Don't forget, Kiedrowski had already wrapped up the national championship prior to the final round. You'll recall from action in the 125cc class that San Bernardino was slightly different than the rest of the races on the circuit. They used the Supercross format, only one race to decide the championship. Now this is heat race number 1. This is a qualifier to get into the main event. Heat race number 1, top 16 riders would go directly to the main. A great battle in that first heat between rider number 5, Mike LaRocco, and number 21, Steve Lamson. LaRocco had the early lead. Lamson, though, making the pass on LaRocco. Now, again, I point out to you that this is only qualifying. Common sense says, hey, let's just settle back. We will accept the positions that we have and go into the main and duke it out there. That's when the points and the money are paid. But LaRocco was not content with that scenario. LaRocco came back. He made the pass on Lamson, and Lamson returned the favor one more time. He had the better line through that corner, and Lamson emerged with the number 1 position. LaRocco still not done. He railed around the outside of Lamson, and LaRocco again moves to the front running position. So LaRocco would go on to win that moto with Lamson in tow. Now coming up, Guy Cooper. Watch this move. Watch Cooper as he dives off this. Look at this. Now we're going to see it again in slow motion. Completely parallel to the ground. Would you believe when he disappeared from view that he saved it? Guy Cooper, in riding his last race in a very illustrious career, would finish into number 5 position, but what a show he put on. First heat, top 16 again to the main. LaRocco, Lamson, Bradshaw, Brian Manley, and again Cooper finishing in 5th. Second heat race, and the return of Jeff Stanton to competition. You recall Stanton had been out the past couple of races due to an ailing back. Rick Ryan, number 531, got the whole shot. Right behind him was number 12, Jeff Matasevich. Then John Dowd was 3rd, and here comes Stanton. Stanton to dispose of John Dowd, who at that time had worked to the number 2 position. Rick Ryan dropping off the pace. Now Stanton setting his sights on Jeff Matasevich's rear wheel. He makes the pass, and Stanton would go on to take the win in the second heat race, followed by Matasevich, Dowd, and Lance Smale. Rick Ryan, who had run up front early in the heat race, finished in the number 6 position. Last chance qualifier, top 8 went to the main event. It was won by Mike Healy, followed by Kemp, Gom, and Boykin. Main event time, and don't forget now, we're not looking at a pair of motos. We're looking at a single race to determine the San Bernardino champion, and that race would pay double points. Mike Kiedrowski, wrapping up the title, was not in evidence at the racetrack. He was still at the hospital being looked at and having his body repaired. David Bradshaw took the early lead in the final event, and already you can see Bradshaw's riding a little bit on the ragged side. He was passed by Steve Lamson, rider number 21. That's Jeff Matasevich holding down the number 3 position. Now watch Bradshaw. He's not going to hold that second spot very long. There's Bradshaw. He gets sideways, tries to bring it back, and he high sides. Color Bradshaw gone from this one. That gave the number 2 position to Jeff Matasevich, but Matasevich quickly challenged by rider number 5, Mike LaRocco. LaRocco found the inside line on that corner, and he takes over the number 2 position. Jeff Stanton not having a good day. His back was still bothering him. He was not comfortable riding at San Bernardino. Stanton pulled off. He had absolutely nothing to gain. The championship chase was over several races ago. This is the battle for 3rd. Jeff Matasevich has it. Phil Lawrence wants it. Lawrence is going to make the pass. He'll take over 3rd. Matasevich would not be a factor the rest of the day. In fact, the Team Suzuki rider would continue his backward slide and would ultimately end up in the 32nd position. Toward the front of the pack, Steve Lamson was having things his way until Mike LaRocco showed up. LaRocco made the pass. That's just the way he did it on Jeff Matasevich to take over the lead, and from that point, LaRocco was unchallenged. He would win the season finale. Here are the results from San Bernardino. LaRocco, Lamson, Lawrence, Dowd. Finishing 5th was Guy Cooper, who had announced his retirement. So Mike Kiedrowski wraps up the 250cc National Championship with 6 victories in the 8-race series. Coming up, a 4-race series to decide the 500cc National Champion. We'll start with the opening moto in the 500cc class. Now coming up, a horrendous crash in the first corner. It's a right-hander. Watch what happens. Mike Kiedrowski is at the bottom of that huge pile. Kiedrowski already suffering from a bone-jarring crash that took place in the final round of the 250cc National Championship Series, and that certainly could not be of help. Roy Turner, the team manager for Kawasaki, runs out to see if Mike is okay, and he says, "Hey, I'm okay, Roy. Get back and do your job. I'll do mine." Meanwhile, up front, doing everyone's job was Mike LaRocco, rider number 5, Jeff Stanton, rider number 2, holding on to the number 2 position, and back of the pack, providing all of the excitement, was Kiedrowski. Picked himself up off the ground, and he really began to reel in the riders. He would finish 7th overall in that moto. Meanwhile, Jason McCormick, local favorite from Vancouver, Washington, was holding down the number 3 position, and much to the crowd's delight, he stayed there for a long time. However, he was eventually reeled in by Steve Lamson, rider number 21. McCormick would have to settle for 4th overall in that moto. It was Mike LaRocco all the way winning the opening moto of the season in the 500cc class. Second moto, no repeat of that crash, but there would be a repeat of LaRocco's win. This guy looks red hot in the 500cc Championship Series. Early going, though, it was Steve Lamson and Mike Kidrowski. Recovered nicely from that first moto, didn't he? They were battling for the lead. However, Mike LaRocco passed them both to take over the number 1 position. Then came rider number 2, Jeff Stanton, and he would finish in that spot. There's the checkered flag for Mike LaRocco, a pair of moto wins. He wins overall honors for the day, followed by Jeff Stanton with a pair of second-place finishes. Steve Lamson, good ride, a pair of third-place finishes. Look at this. Mike Kidrowski recovered to finish 7th in the first moto, 4th in the second moto. Outstanding effort. From Washougal, the series moved east for round 2 to Millville, Minnesota. The early lead in moto number 1 went to Mike LaRocco with Kidrowski in tow. Lamson was third, then came Jeff Stanton. Stanton is going to swap positions with Steve Lamson. He'll take the corner wide and cut across the front of Lamson to take over third. Now, 500 cc's are a handful no matter what type of terrain you're on. David Gaylor will tell you that it was particularly tough here in Minnesota. We asked Mike Kidrowski, how do you ride a 500?
I kind of picture myself when I ride a 500 as driving like an Indy car or something like that. You have to use the power wisely, put the power to the ground, don't let the tires spin too much, and, you know, use it like that instead of just hammering the throttle and hoping to go in that direction. You have to aim it and, you know, get on the gas smooth, and then it'll work for you. You know, that's the way you have to ride a 500. You can't just grab a handful and hope for the best.
Well, Kidrowski was getting the best out of the machine on that day. He was running in the number 2 position. LaRocco was out front, Stanton third, and Steve Lamson holding down the number 4 position. And 5th place was Mike Healy, until Healy, with a flat tire, had to pull off the track. The terrain was just too much, the soft conditions for Healy to handle. Then all of a sudden, Mike Kidrowski pulled to a stop. He was up on top of a hill overlooking the mechanics' signal area, and they were watching him, and he was motioning that his throttle was the problem. Shane Nally, his mechanic, started up the hill after him to provide whatever service could be provided, while Jeff Stanton took over the number 2 position, and he set out after Mike LaRocco. Now, Kidrowski's problems, whatever they were, corrected themselves. He wiggled the throttle a few times, and by the time Shane got there, the bike was running again. Kidrowski fell over trying to turn it around, but he did get the job done, and he was back on the track, and he would complete the moto. Headed for the checkered flag, rider number 5, Team Kawasaki's Mike LaRocco from LaPorte, Indiana. LaRocco takes the first moto win. He was followed across the line by Jeff Stanton, Lamson, Fisher, and Kidrowski was 5th. Now, LaRocco is not noted for good hole shots. However, in Millville, he did a fine job in moto number 1. Here's what he had to say.
I guess I ran out of bad starts, so I had to get a few good ones in there. No, actually, I've been working on it. You know, that's the thing that's been keeping me from winning, so I practiced more on that than I did on anything else, and it seemed to help out.
Second moto, and LaRocco would pull another decent hole shot, although the best hole shot would be pulled by Steve Lamson. He'll be the leader rounding corner number 1. Not far off the pace will come rider number 2, Jeff Stanton. At the tail end of the pack, there are some riders that are going to suffer the first corner blues. Watch this. The muddy conditions at Millville collected 4. Let's go to the other end of the track in the nastiest whoop section in America. Now, Lamson is still leading, Stanton is in second, and here comes LaRocco. Watch what happens. LaRocco makes his bid just a little bit too early, loses control of the Kawasaki. LaRocco goes boom. Watch how quickly, though, LaRocco is up. Generally, in a crash like that, you're going to let the rest of the field pass you to not endanger your body or bike, to avoid getting hit before you get back into the fray. But LaRocco was looking for a championship in his 500cc class, and he was not about to waste time. From that point, LaRocco really went to work. He passed riders in wholesale lots on every section of the racetrack. LaRocco through that feared whoop section. Now, how did he treat it the next time around? Look at this. He just got on the gas, worked his way between a couple of riders, and continued his charge toward the front. Now watch this little dip. LaRocco's going to be way out of shape, but he maintains control. But a few laps later was out of control and had to pick himself up off the ground. Now from this point, LaRocco had every right to sit back and rest on his laurels. The first moto win, Things had not been going his way. The motorcycle obviously twisted and bent a little bit, but LaRocco got right back into it and again started charging toward the front. Now watch this. LaRocco was cut off. Watch what he does. He was cut off by that rider just prior to crossing that finish line. We're going to see it again. There's the move by that rider. The blue flag was out. That says move over, and the guy did. He moved into LaRocco's way. So LaRocco hits him on the back of the helmet. Watch. Bam! With a slap to the head, he completes the pass. Jeff Stanton headed toward the finish line and a victory in Moto number 2. And would you believe this was Stanton's first overall win of the 1993 National Championship season? Here are the results of the second Moto, and look who finished third. Mike LaRocco, despite all of the problems, had worked up inside the top 5, took a third-place finish, and that was good enough to give him second overall for the day. Overall honors, of course, went to Stanton with a 2-1 finish. Broome Tioga Sports Center in Binghamton, New York. Round 3 of the series. Here are the highlights as seen on Prime Network. The whole shot is going to go to Steve Lamson, rider number 21. He'll be followed by LaRocco. Then Mike Kidrowski, the defending 500cc champ. Jeff Stanton will be 4th. Now, the order will not stay that way very long. Here's Lamson out front. There's LaRocco. Here comes Kidrowski and Stanton. What we're going to see is Steve Lamson going back to 4th place with Mike Kidrowski taking the number 1 position with LaRocco in tow. Jeff Stanton, rider number 2, is holding down the number 3 slot. Now that's the way they would finish at the checkered flag. The surprising thing here is that Mike Kidrowski took the win rather than handing it to his teammate Mike LaRocco. LaRocco was just 4 points ahead of Stanton in the championship chase. Kidrowski was 29 down. If Stanton would end up winning the title by a couple, that move would have come back to haunt Team Kawasaki. Moto number 2, Jeff Stanton blasted to the front of the pack. He was followed by Jason McCormick. Close behind came Mike LaRocco with Kidrowski running back in the pack. Now, when the field sorted themselves out, LaRocco would pass Jeff Stanton. The thing we'll call your attention to is the move made by Stanton, the near disaster. Watch this after the pass was made. Can you believe that Stanton saved? Look at this. The motorcycle is perpendicular to the ground. He hits on the front wheel. Bang, comes down. Stanton is so strong, he was able to save that near disastrous endo. At the checkered flag in Moto number 2, it was Mike LaRocco, with Stanton not far behind. Kidrowski would finish in the number 3 position. Let's take a look at the overall positions in Binghamton, or at Binghamton, I should say. LaRocco, the overall win, then Kidrowski with a 1-3, Stanton with a 3-2, Lamson finishing 4th with a pair of 4th place finishes. So 3 of 4 events are down. LaRocco on top by 9 over Jeff Stanton, Lamson running in 3rd, then Kidrowski. The number 1 place, the final round of the 500cc National Championship Series, was up for grabs. Mike LaRocco held a 9-point lead over his closest competitor, that being Jeff Stanton from Team Honda. LaRocco had to be thinking about 1 year earlier. He came to this same facility with an advantage in the 125cc class that looked to be unbeatable. He scored no points in either moto and lost the 125cc title to Jeff Emig. He had to drive that thought out of his mind, and drive it away he did. The whole shot went to Lance Smale, with Jeff Stanton running a close 2nd. In 3rd place was Mike LaRocco. Mike Kidrowski was 4th. Now Stanton is going to quickly pass Lance Smale, but watch the pass between the Kawasaki teammates. Remember again, Mike LaRocco, the championship points leader, was in 3rd place. Watch this. Here comes Kidrowski to take that 3rd place away from Mike LaRocco. Now the difference between 1st, that's where Stanton is, and 4th, that's where LaRocco is 7 points. You have to wonder why Kidrowski made that pass and put his teammate, who was fighting for the championship, in that very vulnerable position. Kidrowski, though, was not finished, and you'll see what I mean before this moto was over. Mike LaRocco and Kidrowski both disposed of Lance Smale. At that point in time, it was Stanton out front. Mike LaRocco was running in a number 3 position, and sandwiched between those 2 riders, Mike Kidrowski. He did not stay there. He moved up to challenge Jeff Stanton and would indeed take the lead away from Stanton. For Stanton, coming into this season finale, the way was clear. He needed to win. Regardless of what happened to Mike LaRocco, he could only go out, go for the win, and then let the chips fall where they may. Here's what Stanton had to say.
all I can do is control myself and go out there and try to win both motos. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone, the whole year hasn't gone the way I wanted it to, but that's racing.
Mike LaRocco, meanwhile, was racing all by himself in the number 3 position. He knew exactly where he was. He knew what the points difference would be between himself and Stanton should the moto end that way. LaRocco probably a little on the nervous side. He was fighting for his first ever national championship. He did not want to risk that title by taking an unnecessary risk in a crash. So Mike Kiedrowski wins, Jeff Stanton finishes second, and Mike LaRocco, as you'll see, is way back in the number 3 position. But look at Stanton. Not very happy. He needed that win, and he knows it. Kiedrowski was already in the pits. Stanton almost there by the time LaRocco crossed the finish line. That's how far back he finished in the number 3 position. Makes no difference had it been 6 inches or 2 miles. Third place points are third place points. Here is the difference between the 2 riders as we head toward the season finale of the 1993 Championship Motocross Series. 7. Off the line, it was rider number 21, Steve Lampson, with the hole shot, but close behind came the contenders for the title. Mike Jones was in second place. Mike Kiedrowski in third will make quick work of Jones. There's the pass. Jones drops back to third. He'll go back further than that before the day is over. Let's turn our attention to the front of the pack and the pass that is being made. Mike Kiedrowski sweeps around the outside of Steve Lampson, sets him up for the next corner. Kiedrowski takes over the number 1 position, dropping Lampson back to second. Here comes LaRocco. He's currently in the number 3 position. All he has to do is stay there, and the title is his. Stanton, running in 4th, needs to pass at least 3 riders to have any opportunity to win this championship. It's not going to happen. Mike LaRocco, though, was not through with his charge. Here's LaRocco. He tries the outside of Lampson. Nowhere to go there. He's going to get Lampson, though, before this moto is over. Smart money says LaRocco should set in the number 3 position. Should not worry about the pass. Should not endanger his bike or body in attempting the pass. Apparently, though, there was no smart money on this race. LaRocco rockets into the number 2 position. Now here comes perhaps the most amazing piece of riding in the entire series. Steve Lampson holding down the number 3 position. Steve Lampson has not a prayer at winning the title. His teammate still does. His teammate needs every point he can possibly garner. What does Lampson do? Well, he stays in front of his teammate. Stanton had to work and work and work to get around Lampson. They used to call it team tactics when one rider would get out of the way of another on the same team. It appears that team tactics are a thing of the past. It's every rider for themselves, every rider trying to pick up every possible point in the moto. Last lap, and time has run out. Mike LaRocco keeps it upright, and he's going to win the first ever national championship of his career, and how sweet it is. Just 1 year ago, the 125 title was wrested away from him in the final events of the season. He had a huge point lead, but lost it all. Mike's father, Mike Sr., on the sidelines, still does not believe it's going to happen until Mike crosses that checkered flag, and there it is. Mike LaRocco is the 1993 500cc national champ. Now Mike looks around and says, hey, shouldn't there be champagne and flowers here? Well, the only thing he found was the hand of Jeff Stanton, as Stanton was the first rider to congratulate Mike LaRocco on winning that title. A big hug from Dad. The series is over, and 1993 is history in the world of motocross. Here's the way they finished at Delmont. It was Kiedrowski with 1-1 finishes to take the overall win. LaRocco, Stanton, Lampson rounding out the top 4 in the overall standings at the season finale. The final standings, Mike LaRocco with a pair of wins is the champion. Jeff Stanton finishing second, Mike Kiedrowski third, and Steve Lampson in 4th place. In 1993, 3 riders enjoyed the fast track to victory. Doug Henry won the 125 class, Mike Kiedrowski the 250 class, and Mike LaRocco the 500. As I said at the outset, it was a great year for motocross.